Hi, I'm Rodney Johnson, co-editor of the Boom and Bust newsletter. And I'm joined by Harry Dent, who's also co-editor of the Boom and Bust newsletter. Today, we're going to talk about Harley Davidson. Now, why Harley Davidson? Harley Davidson is a perfect example of how companies, industries, and economies change over time based on people. We're going to use this three-part video series to walk through what happened to Harley Davidson, how their fortunes changed from booming to a bust over the last 30 years. And we do this by using demographics. Demographics is a very powerful force that can show you years, even decades in advance, what's going to happen to a company, an industry, and even the broader economy. You can see how lifestyle choices are going to affect and make big changes in industries and economies here and around the world. Now, Harry, why don't you explain to us how you came across demographics as this powerful economic force and what you see coming in the years ahead?
Yeah, it's funny, Rodney. The origins of me tripping on demographics actually came from the early 80s. I was consulting at first to large Fortune 100 companies at Bain & Company, strategic consulting, having to forecast the direction of their industries. And then I started working with entrepreneurial companies because, frankly, they were more interesting and faster moving. And with the large companies, they were facing this huge dilemma in the 60s and 70s. They had just boomed, dealing with the Bob Hope generation, the generation before the baby boom, and all of a sudden they were faltering, losing market share to foreign competition. And of course, the new baby boom generation was coming along. They were younger, they liked different products and services, so these companies were in trouble. Now, when I get over to the young, new entrepreneurial companies, they're the opposite. They are totally appealing to young, new, innovative baby boomers in the early 80s. So I was forced to start studying this baby boom generation. How many of them are there? How big is this generation? And the truth is, this generation is massive compared to the generations before or even after today, the echo boom. And, of course, they were doing different things. They were a very innovative generation that tried to change the world when they were young, and they started to really impact the economies they grew up. So the more I studied, the more I found out, number one indicator, I almost fell off my chair, 1988. After studying the baby boom generation, all these demographics, I see on one side of my desk is this S&P 500 adjusted for inflation, a long-term chart. The other side of the desk, I just happen to have the birth index for the baby boom in previous generations. I look at these charts and say, oh my gosh, this is the same chart. Put them together, they basically correlate on a 45 to 50-year lag. Well, I knew from studying demographics, that's the peak in spending of the average family in the United States. And so that's called the spending wave. And think of the economy this simple, and it really is at a certain point. It's like the baby boom generation is one household of family. You know, the birth index was rising from 1937 to 61. You just move forward that birth index 46 years for the predictable peak in spending of the average family, and you get a boom on that lag, 1983 to 2007. We were predicting this since the late 80s, that this boom would end around 2007, and we would start to enter a slowdown that would last for many, many years. That's how simple demographics can be. Well, the best part of it was I started studying individual industries. Well, we do all types of things, cradle to grave, as we age. So also think about, again, the baby boom generation, the peak of them were born in 1961. Think of that generation for a minute as just one average household that enters the workforce at age 20. That's where the action starts, the spending. Because we don't spend money until we enter the workforce start to earn money. Now, that's average. A lot of people, it's 18 out of high school, another big group out of college, 22, and everywhere in between, and after some people go to graduate school, but 20 is the average. That average household, that average person is going to get married at age 26, and that's when apartments peak and shopping centers start to get built for these new shoppers. They have their average kid age 28. Now, I don't have exact statistics on this, but I know it's 28 because we look up at infant furniture in the Consumer Expenditure Survey. Now, that's another thing to understand here. I finally found that the U.S. government surveys thousands of households every year, over 600 categories of spending down to the smallest details. Infant furniture peaks at age 28 for the average household. So at age 28 is when the average kid, out of say 2 average kids, is born. So think about that. Get married 26, have the kids at 28. Guess what? Child care peaks 5 years later. From age 0 to 5, that's when you need the most child care. Once they go to elementary school at age 6, The schools take care of them most of the time. So age 33, I find child care babysitting. When do we buy the first home? Right after the kids are born, age 31. The average family buys their first home. Now, as these kids get older and they get a little more testy and more testosterone and they start to become teenagers, we buy a bigger home. Trade-up homes are bought between age 37 and 42. Mortgage interest, the biggest debt we take on, peaks around age 41, 42 for the average family. We continue to spend after that biggest house. We get our kids, high school tuition peaks at age 46. Elementary school, obviously, before that, age 40. College tuition, if your kids go all the way through college, age 50. The peak in spending comes at age 46. Now, this is where Harley Davidson comes in. You say, what does Harley Davidson and motorcycles have to do with the family cycle? You're spending all your money raising the kids, all these different things you're buying as they age for the kids. When the kids start to get out of school and leave the nest, you now have time on your hands for the first time in decades and discretionary income to spend on yourself. So Harley Davidson's peak right there in the mid-40s in motorcycles. College, after college, women start to leave the workforce. You no longer need both people to work to get the kids through school. Then they start to travel. People travel long distance overseas till about age 54, and they realize travel is tiring, it's stressful, jet lag, and from then on, you know what? They want to be on a cruise ship. Just stuff me, feed me, booze, whatever, no jet lag. And of course, they buy life insurance in their late 50s. Health insurance, they peak in their late 60s. Long-term care insurance, 78. Prescription drugs is the last thing to peak that we can track. 81, that's when the average woman dies. So again, from cradle to grave, it's not just this broad economy that grows like from 1983 to 2007 roughly on a 46-year lag, and then slows down with the what we call the baby busters until the next generation, the echo boom, comes along. Every industry has its growth surge all the way, and every part of real estate, commercial real estate, when people entering the workforce in the 70s, that's when it did the best. Remember we said apartments and shopping centers around the mid-'80s, starter homes, late 80s, trade-up homes, late 90s, early 2000s, on and on. Vacation homes of the last thing to peak. So from cradle to grave, you can see which companies, which industries are going to do well within a broader boom and bust, which affects everybody.
Now that's pretty amazing. So using this information, obviously I've been working with you for 12, 15 years now. We can forecast how companies, how industries, how large economies are going to do decades in advance. And it starts, of course, with people and how they spend money in very predictable ways based on their family cycle. And we all know it. You know, you have children, things become more expensive. You're providing for them, as Harry talked about. You're buying more clothes. You're sending them to school. You're sending them to guitar lessons. You're going on vacation. Just going out to eat is expensive when you have kids in the household. And we all know it because we've all done it. But it means that we can use this very predictableness about what people do to say, look, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, this will be our growth and contraction of different industries and companies. Now, this means that we had a forecast of where we were going to go in the economy, and Harley Davidson, of course, during the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. So if we go all the way back to 1988, what did you think was going to happen to Harley and really motorcycles during the boom years?
Well, I used to tell people that Harley was the perfect example because most of the motorcycles are bought between age 45 and 49. It is the male midlife crisis, literally, where they get to finally, and this would apply to sports cars, it would apply to boats and things like that too, but what does the average male do when they're free to the kids, has some income? That's when they're going to buy a motorcycle, and not a motor scooter, a motorcycle. So on that 45 to 49 year lag, we expected, in the 90s and 2000s, Harley, motorcycles to be one of the strongest growth industries. Now, the reason this is so concentrated, most things are brought gradually over time peak. Again, a huge amount of motorcycle spending in a 5-year period. So Harley dominated an industry. They were the lifestyle leader for baby boomers, which is cool. And they dominated this industry, so their stock just went straight up. It actually, did better than a lot of tech stocks. So we expected to boom until about 2006, 7, 8, right along. Harley peaks pretty much with the peak in spending. A lot of things don't, but that's one of those things right in the mid-40s. We expected it to boom and then bust.
So the expectation going back to the late 80s was to have Harley basically ride up this boom, get to the peak in the mid-2000s, and then fall away just before the greater economy. Yeah. So in our second video, we're going to look at what happened to Harley Davidson and use that as a proxy, of course, what happened to the larger United States economy. As you already know, because we all, of course, understand Harley Davidson, we did have a big boom, we did have a run-up, but actually when Harley Davidson peaked, both in sales and in production, might surprise you. So please join us in the next video installment to find out exactly what happened to Harley Davidson through the boom and even the bust. Thank you.